Hello, everyone. Thank you to West East. Welcome to West East by Coastal Poets reading series. The co-hosts are me, Lynn McGee, the founding co-host, Carolyne Wright, and Sandy Yannone, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. So we've muted everyone in the audience to protect against bombing. And if you have comments, please share them in the chat column. The people who are reading often like to see the chat column after. And also we will put there the poets' bios and links to buy their books. We are recording, obviously, and if you want privacy, you can stop your video. You may have noticed we are on a new time and day now, Saturdays at 3 p.m. East Coast, noon on the West Coast, and we've done this to better accommodate international attendees. So I'm going to start by introducing Jane Rosenberg LaForge, our first reader. We have the privilege here of hearing from a poet whose work blends memory, history, and the intimate terrain of family into something both deeply personal and universally resonant. LaForge reminds us that poetry is not simply a record of what has happened, but a way of re-seeing the stories that shape us with clarity, imagination, and a voice that is unmistakably her own. In her newest collection, Jane turns her eye toward the dreams we grow up with, the expectations that shape us, and the truths we uncover in the aftermath of pursuing or abandoning those dreams. The collection draws from the landscapes of childhood and family, from the cultural myths we're raised on, and from the subtle, sometimes startling moments in which we realize what those dreams have cost. She brings us work that asks us to reflect on the dreams that shaped us, the ones that slipped away, and the ones that still insist on being heard. So this is a collection of both loss and possibility. Please join me in welcoming Jane Rosenberg LaForge. We need to unmute you. That's good.
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. And thank you to Susana for having me here. And thank you to all of you for coming. And I'm going to be reading from my new collection, which I hope I can convince you to buy. And I'll start now. This poem is called Flying Lessons. In the hours the sky approached its daily decision, relax into a soothing baby blue like the eyes of my father, or revert to the red cast of airborne pollutants that toyed with a population of asthma and allergy sufferers. My father began his flying lessons. 12 miles due north from LAX, pros arriving and departing in a most curious flight pattern, explained to me in another context as an upside-down wedding cake. A pilot was trying to impress me with how dangerous it was, though my father wouldn't hear of it, so confident he was in his training decades after it was involuntarily terminated. He took his lessons on Sunday, when the air trafficked more in plaintive voices than in fulfilled pledges, so there was room enough for mastering another dimension, because that's what flying is. Pitch, roll, and yaw, though his mind worked exclusively in symmetrical terms, the seizing and swelling of lungs, squeezing and twisting of his stomach, the crash and dissonance of his hearing, so the sound of instructions from the control tower was more like radio silence. Years later, he confessed how badly he wanted a prescribed existence, codes and protocols for knowing how to act, what to do next, assuming the theoretical was fact, even if it meant crossing the prime green line dividing the heavens. All I could find of this venture were receipts of my mother's tired remuneration of the defects that grounded him, what can be cured now with surgery, implants, antibiotics, even steroids if he had the patience. But he lacked that as much as faith, even though such qualities animate flying, the belief that you can come back from disappearing into the sun, like some sleek and hollow creature guided by providence. This poem is called Fracture Mechanics. The failure of brittle materials was first explained during World War I. Soon after my grandmother sailed the Atlantic and her little brother was put to work in dry land farming, a favored practice on the Canadian prairie, as frail soils were manipulated by the hands of orphans. Once all the moisture had been dispensed, the family decamped for permanent drought conditions in Los Angeles. My grandfather followed, though he did not prosper in the beginning as he planned, but instead clung to his new and more successful in-laws. The women sewed ties for a nickel apiece, so long as they could keep their men ignorant. The matriarch, my great-grandmother, collected hair for wigs assembled for her co-religionists. Stresses in small objects are more likely to result in breakage compared to the vast gathering of gossamer fibers molded into wings and fuselages. Just consider the failure of lungs or a single pancreas, overwhelmed by their duties, becoming impervious to air and the demands of citrus, grown a continent away, then transported by rail to the Southland. Where else could the principles of fracture mechanics be so amply demonstrated than in the body of the patriarch? His inside so desiccated by sugars and smog, he shattered like so much ceramic, an accumulation of clay sculpted and fired for a moment's awe or convenience, its pieces ultimately scattered in the dirt like something enigmatic, ancient, or useless. Okay, this is called Firebug. My mother did not talk to fire, nor my father to the gods, though they swarmed around our house like insects. The god of shame was paramount, its minions of reproach and remorse, not to mention guilt and bad conscience, fear and distrust. They burrowed into the woods like carpenter bees, into the walls like termites. I suppose if my mother had conversed with fire, from the artificial logs in the fireplace to the butts of her cigarettes and her father's cigar embers, she would not have complained so much about the incompetence of the men around her, unable to cure what ailed their women or summon enough money for proper doctors. If my father had access to the gods, imagine how that would have fixed the dynamics, with someone to blame or absorb the protests, someone to accuse of contaminating minds with doubts and hearts with defects. Perhaps my own life would not have been so directionalist, like the wind that blows backward, prying husks from palms, bark from eucalyptus, revealing the raw material like muscle and sinew that feeds such a troubled incandescence. This poem is called Pachinko, and I'm going to read another poem later called Kintsugi that goes with it. And if you have questions, you can ask. Pachinko. Amid echoes and ashes, a civilization nearly obliterated for its excesses, my mother learned to play pachinko, a game of gravity within glass, in smoky arcades far from the military base where her father was stationed. In pachinko, you pull a spring-loaded hammer to set off a stream of tiny balls falling through a course of obstacles, and hope against hope they meet their objectives. Like pieces of shot wreaking havoc in the lungs of her future husband, especially when they traveled to the beach or the mountains, he'd be felled by asthma as if the air was either too raw or vigorous for him to process. My sister and I grew up largely vacationless, believing our father could not breathe without smog, so inured were his functions to metals and volatiles. Like the circuitous progress of pachinko players banking on airless outcomes, against all the theories that once sent bombs to their targets, it was better to wager on the flipping of coins or saying no or yes to a marriage. Our mother knew pachinko was chance, variable, the pitting oneself against ineffable mechanics, low stakes in the presence, but for a lifetime, a kind of foreclosure on her curiosity about the world and on the souls of her descendants. And now I'd like to read the pachinko poem, if I can find it. I mean, the Kensuke poem, if I can find it. Here it is. My mother's lipstick leached into the wrinkles above her lips as she aged, like a river pressing its boundaries into a delta. Crude osmosis, best explored in an aerial photograph for National Geographic. One of those glossy pages we used to cut out for collages in school as the boys giggled about the tribal tits. We girls would run our fingers over the disassociated devastation of the planet and thought it was beautiful and horrible, like a duality inside of us. My mother also lived for 9 months an hour away from Nagasaki and never visited, as if radioactive articles could see through new buildings like the reaches of a precious metal through ceramic. What she did do was work as a recreation director on an army base, collect straw hats, wooden dolls, satin shoes, too small to wear, and silk paintings of the best omen, a mountain everyone wanted to dream of. My sister and I beheaded the dolls, punched holes in the hats, and with our American feet stretched out the shoes to unconscionable limits. But to the lipstick, that was the point, how it fingered its way toward her nostrils. Her like filaments of tiny red light bulbs perpetually burning, besides names in the synagogue, remembrance as fuel rather than the bursting of atoms. Occasionally, my mother would talk about finding a boyfriend, a new husband, but then she'd say she couldn't be bothered with the renovations. The lipstick would return as if marking seams and sutures on a face that no longer cared how it looked in a world where she knew she could no longer repair everything. All righty. This is called 3 Stories About My Sister's Birth. My mother was soaking her dirty feet in her father's chlorinated pool when her famously taciturn brother, who had bought the house, put up his parents in the style to which they were accustomed after decades of government-financed globetrotting, while he and his ham radio equipment that reached to the ceiling were holed up in one of the tiny bedrooms. And he said, "It's time to have the baby now." And off they went to the hospital. He was the kind of doctor who puts people to sleep, because he didn't want to be a doctor, but he liked to play with machines, catheters, pumps, and pressure monitors, the counting of every artificial breath and beat on his multi-dial wrist watches from Switzerland, where the family had lived for a short period and revered their hosts for their exactitude with time and with hygiene and meticulousness. I know this because my mother explained it, unexpurgated. Even how the nurse asked my mother what she wanted, and my mother's response, a cigarette, because she wanted me to believe it. She admitted she smoked through both her pregnancies. My grandmother smoked too, the one with the heart condition. She insisted her son become a doctor because she wanted to be the mother of someone so accomplished. Though the profession would eventually kill him, hepatitis that bubbled over into his bowel, liver and lung cancer, despite transplants and treatments. Our mother smoking might explain why my sister and I were so small. It's been studied, smoke and low birth rate, all the corollaries, though smallness wasn't considered a defect back then, but something natural, part of the environment. As my mother drew on the comfort supplied by 7,000 different compounds and chemicals, she saw her father and husband on the other side of the maternity ward glass eating pizza. My mother swears this is true, though my father had an ulcer and couldn't eat anything. And my grandfather, a retired Army colonel, whose rights and privileges did not deign to fall so low as to eating pizza with a son-in-law who escaped military service through medical exemptions. But my grandfather tolerated my father during the marriage. After all, he had practically arranged the pairing. Though my mother never told me as much, I learned to assume what happened based on what I know about the players, their ages at the time of their wedding, and the subsequent arrangements, who paid for what and which emergencies were caused by whom, frequent and copious. Once my sister was born, the story goes fuzzy, though I was there to witness it. Piano lessons, punk rock improvisations, and betrayal by her friends that my sister still couldn't accept decades after they occurred, and my mother remaining there for her always, though she preferred not to narrate her way through it. Not because she never admitted my sister's life was a disappointment, that it did not become the epic that the early IQ tests and school grades had promised, but because she died too early from a spasm of bad luck, what my mother had given her, or worse, genetics. Okay, this is called fireproofing. In grade school, fire was a triangle. Oxygen, of course, was everywhere, so we had to watch for other inspirations. We lived on a ledge, less involved than most homes when it came to accelerants, though within the pine and conifers that were said to be material, notify a grown-up if you see smoke, but not always your parents, as they are prone to see faces in the blaze as it reaches upward, mouths wrenched open to give their final testaments. After school, my friends and I peeled the bark of eucalyptus as if it was our sunburned skin, or tin foil to be sundered from wax paper, the wrapping of our confections. We separated vinyl and plastic with our fingernails from the covers of our textbooks because we are looking for the gods in our subjects. What kindles decisions in men, heroics in boys, the palm, sage, and greasewood bushes in our neighborhoods, native and perilous, yet necessary in the season when only roots in the soil resisted the call of gravity downward. We ran from flowers because they attracted bees, just as we ran to escape the words and warnings of our mothers, their presence like embers with that power to resurrect the matrix. Okay. This is called Sisters. The fact of our bodies twisted and disproportionate to the percentiles in length and habits of thought for our age and intellects made us similar, yet the word we learned not to use when describing ourselves because it was too common, expected, what doctors prescribed for our infractions and faults. She was pigeon-toed, my hips unsettled, one set too far down in its joint, the other too high, our knees aimed inward at the same slant. This was the giveaway, what made us relatives. In the bathtub, where we were ordered to dissolve the dirt we were singularly adept at compiling on our limbs and faces, our parents had always rushed through this stage in favor of adjourning another day of chaos. Our grandparents could trace a torture route through blood and protein combinations, centuries of genetic roulette that made us what we were, now motherless, rolling on our uncle's mattress and wide awake. That night we became orphans, as our grandparents preferred over other terms with depraved connotations, was our longest together, the following morning's daylight seemingly relieved of its obligations. As we skidded into this next era on a longer walk to and from school, tired and weakened, resembling twigs we tore off trees to drag along the pavement, not as punishment, but as liberation from the weight of their genesis. In this, we were reaffirmed as family, sisters, intimates, though what choice did we have? No choice to deliberate. This one's called African Violet. In the flower pot on the windowsill, where the light cast a skeletal glow on the ceramic, my grandmother, the one with the heart condition, tended to an African violet for my sister and I supposedly gave her one summer. Our parents were the ones who concocted this present, saying it was from us because we were too young to know why she was in the hospital every so often, her heart misshapen, a valve cracked, its impulses corrupted by streptococcus. The flower pot was both magnet and mirror, glinting like bone in the dark, what we might have glimpsed if we could see inside her, not quite bedridden, but perennially outfitted in slippers and a house coat. If we could have fixed her with adhesive and antiseptic, we would have gladly attempted, though her son, the doctor, said there was no treatment, only getting through each day as it was, silent and heavily monitored. She was not like our other grandmother, robust with a command of photosynthesis at her fingertips. But when the mood was right, she inserted into the soil little charcoal pills that made the violet bloom like the mouths of baby birds at their inaugural demand of sustenance. Unable to separate wants from needs, from an instinctual tug toward the sun in colder months that multiplied as if time had another nurturer, one with a black thumb.
That's great, Jane. Thank you so much.
Is that enough?
Yes.
Okay.
But thank you so much for the work. And yes, and here is the cover of the book.
I hope I didn't read too long.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
Okay. And now we're going to move to Carolyne, who is going to introduce Martha Collins for us.
Go. I have to unmute myself, and I have just done so, and I am posting Martha's bio. Oh, wait, what did I just post? Uh-oh, I posted the same thing again. I was trying to save it. Hold on just a sec. Well, I'll just start. It's a real pleasure to introduce Martha, whom I have known for these several decades. Here's the bio. We we met originally when I was in Cambridge. I had a fellowship at the what's now called the Radcliffe Institute, and Martha was a professor of English and creative writing at UMass, University of Massachusetts, Boston, where she had founded the creative writing program, and where she and Lloyd Schwartz, I remember, were sort of like the stalwarts of that program. And Martha and I became friends. We shared in common a lot of interests in the literary community in the Boston area. We were both involved with the New England Poetry Club. And also, Martha was very involved with the William Joyner Center for the Study of War and Social Consequences, which had a lot of admiration for that, because it had been started, I believe, by war veterans, and this would have been veterans of that time of what we called the Vietnam era. And now, of course, there have been other wars for which there are new veterans. And Martha, in her relationship with the Joyner Center, was translating the work of poets of Vietnam. And to date, she has published 5 collections of poems from Vietnamese. And she and I were involved in a translators group at one point in the Northeast area. And we met in each other's houses, various members of the group, in their apartments and condos, etc. And it was always amazing, as we shared our work and celebrated and made comments. It was amazing to hear Martha reading the Vietnamese, which is an amazing language to listen to. And I was translating from Bengali and Spanish and whatever. And we also shared some advice and suggestions about a few translators, collaborators we were working with who were presenting some challenges, and they were a bit hard to communicate with, but that's a whole other story. Well, around the time in the mid-90s, I moved away, and the next time I was really aware of Martha I was by then living in Seattle. I'd moved to Seattle with my husband, whom I'd met. And the book of Martha's that stood out for me at that point was her book called Blue Front, which is, a book which Jean Valentine, the poet Jean Valentine, had called clear-eyed, sorrowing, searching poem of witness. And it's the story, retold in the form of this haunting, compelling, repetitive, wonderfully fractured but seamless. It's a book-length poem about her father, who, as a boy of 5 in Cairo, Illinois, right there in the boundary between the North and the South, where those two rivers, the Blue Ohio and the brown, muddy Mississippi, come together. Her father, as a 5-year-old boy, was hoisted on the shoulders of some adult, and he witnessed a lynching, along with about 10,000 other spectators. It was, a horrific event. And Martha, this was, for me, it just seemed to me a really breakout book, because she takes on this entire, the entire burden and the horror of racism, as the legacy of racism as it persists in this country. And in a way I can empathize, because we're both women of a certain demographic taking on this major issue, so that it has become, I think, an amazing story, and how she has deployed a similar strategy in the books that followed that, Day Unto Day, Night Unto Night, and the most recent book, Casualty Reports, which brings the same power, urgency, and focus to what one reviewer called an intelligent and generous lyric reflection on the devastation of the coal mining industry. And again, this book, dealing with that particular socioeconomic and political issue in wonderfully, lyric, haunting, also drawing on, journalism, eyewitness accounts, and her own witness, because there is coal mining in her ancestry. Her ancestors, not her father, but others, had worked in that industry. So I just find Martha's work really something I admire and learn from. And so I would like to welcome you all to listen to Martha read her work. So welcome, Martha Collins.
Thank you so much, Carolyne, for that generous introduction and that little trip down memory lane. Thank you as well, your fellow organizers of the West East and Beyond series, Susana and Lynn and Sandy, who's not with us. Thank you, Jane, for your reading, and thank you, Suzanne, in advance for yours. And thank you all for being here. I'm going to begin by reading the last part of the last paragraph from the very brief introduction to my recently published and only book of prose, Word Work, Essays, Reviews, Reflections, as a kind of introduction to the poems I'll be reading. So, from this book of essays, all of these essays reflect my love of poetry and my belief in its importance as a channel for living and understanding. The close readings of poems is, I think, a practice for paying close and careful attention to the world and its many others, and for countering the reduction of political and social discourse to bland repetition and vicious epithets. The urgency of this work is more apparent than ever as I write these words in 2025. We have work to do, and some of it is word work. So the first poem I'm going to read is indeed from my most recent book, Casualty Reports. I'm not going to read the poems about coal, which constitute a large part of the book, but there's also a section focusing on war. And the poem I'm going to read right now is from that section. Like her body, the world. Hit and hit and hit and hit and fallen. Getting up and trying to get up. Now one part is hitting another part, wounding its flesh, slicing its own veins, breaking its bones. But wait, we are coming, help is on the way. Now we are hitting the part that is hitting the part. Now it is arm against arm, hand against hand. Now it is eye against eye, no one can see. Now it is ear against ear, there is no mouth. Where is the up to? Where is the up to the body? Where are the parts? Have the parts all fallen apart? We are part of the body we forgot. We thought we lived outside like a brain in a jar. We thought we were pure like thought, nothing to lose. But we are losing too. We are losing parts. Besides, we were never that brain. We were only a part. We thought we would never fall, but we are falling. Falling and falling and falling, hitting the air. Falling, hitting ourself, our own body. Meanwhile, the body, the world, will try to get up, or else the body, the world, will lie down. Now I'm going to turn for most of this reading to some newer poems that I've been writing since 2024. The first three of these I recently put together in something that I'm calling Presidential Suite. I've written a lot about social issues, as Carolyne has indicated, but until recently, I had not written about politics in the sense of the political, in the sense of Washington, in the sense of the president. So the first of these was written on July 4th, 2024, which was 3 days after the Supreme Court granted presidential immunity to whomever. Foretold, July 4, 2024. The white sheet I dreamed floating over us. For sleep, or was it shroud? Cloud of un. We should have known when they called him our David, adultery, murder, our Cyrus, not one of us, but we should have heard king. 2 more tanks, he said in the dream, as if he were ordering coffee. Retribution. They gave him the right to remain. And the next of these poems was written shortly after January 20th. And the words that are italicized that I'll indicate like this are among what at the time were 267 words that caused websites or documents to be either temporarily or permanently removed. Agenda. Delete diversity. Delete equity, delete inclusion, including inclusive, exclude exclusion. Note use of include number on form. Delete gender, scrutinize women, X out X, replace with F or M. Distrust disability, disadvantaged, question equality culture. Challenge climate, replace climate change, with climate resilience. Question, racial, minority, marginal, historically, bias, Hispanic, Black. Question, trauma, scrutinize status. Question, Spanish, remove La Casa Blanca. And they really did remove the Spanish language page from the White House website. The last of these poems from this suite I'll read was written exactly 1 year after the first one, and shortly after the Budget Reconciliation Bill, aka the Big Beautiful Bill, was passed. It's in two voices. On one side, which I'll indicate like this, is a posting that Speaker of the House Mike Johnson put on X, and on the other side are comments. The Budget Reconciliation Bill, July 4, 2025. All this, which increased the budget deficit, is from God, who cut 1.2 trillion from healthcare, reconciled us to himself, cut renewable energy resources through Christ, and gave us 170 billion to deter immigration. The Ministry of Reconciliation, wrote the Speaker of the House after passage of the bill, quoting 2 Corinthians 5:18 under the heading Soli Deo Gloria. And the next three newish poems take us to Palestine, the first of them starting in our own country. All of them. The ones on the bus, the ones on the planes, a mistake, they said, never coming back. The ones in the swamp, the ones with tattoos on their hands, the ones without hands, not coming back. The ones in the rubble, empty pans in their hands, are not going back. There is no back. The shot, the bomb, the ones without food, the ones without water. For water, you need a permit from the army. That last line is from the Palestinian-Israeli film, No Other Land. The next poem was written shortly after October 7th, and this is the poem that Carolyne mentioned earlier. If I lived in a certain country near a certain border, I would not live there anymore. And if I lived across that border, I would not live where I once lived. I might not live at all. My friends might not. My house most likely would not be there anymore. And if it was, I would not have enough to eat and drink. I would not have what all must have to live in this world that someday might not be here anymore. And the last of this little sequence, remnant. Dove rowing, wings, oars, turning, lifting over this glitter rubble world gone wrong. No water, food, medicine, fuel. Christmas was canceled in Bethlehem. God is a watering hole, I dreamed. They are bombing everything, bombing away. Steal away, stole away, home, no home, stolen good. Then the rain, rain flooding the tents. Oh, dove. And now I'll return to my book, Casualty Reports, for an earlier poem about Gaza, written about the siege of Gaza in 2008 and 9, as a reminder that there is a long history of what is happening there, and also as a kind of prayer for Gaza. For the woman who cooks on a fire of sticks and boards beside her shell of a house, her bag of clothes in a tree. For physician Ani Alter-Wu, his wife cut in half, his year-old son turned to pieces. For the 30 dead Samuni family members dug out of the rubble, for the living, including children who clutched dead mothers. For the schools and mosques and homes destroyed by bombs, for the graves disturbed by tanks. For the more than 1,300 dead, including those who walked from their homes as directed with white flags. For those going home to water their trees, lemon and almond and olive, and for those trees. And I'll end with a poem to kind of counter all of that and include all of us, called Benediction. Not a story, we said, not even a line. And there wasn't a line, there was a circle. A perfect circle, though there were breaks. But it wasn't broken, it was open. It was open in the spaces between. It was open in the spaces between us. And we were like candles giving light. But the light came from the length of our bodies. And we were like lilies that opened their throats. And as we opened, we almost touched. And we threw back our heads, and the circle widened. And there was silence, but we were singing. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Martha. That was really powerful.
That was beautiful. Oh, this has really gone fast, this reading. Let me just get up here. Thank you so much, Martha. Okay, so it's my pleasure now to introduce Suzanne Cleary. The first time that I heard Suzanne Cleary read, I think might have been in March 2015 at Cornelia Street Cafe, a now defunct performance space in the West Village that I think many people in our audience are familiar with, and we have all attended and read there over many years. She read from her poetry collection, Beauty Mark, which was released by BKMK Press at the University of Missouri, Kansas City in 2013, and won the John Ciardi Prize for Poetry. Another reading that stands out for me was Suzanne Cleary reading at KGB Bar on West 4th Street, just off 2nd Avenue in the East Village. And she read from Crude Angel, which I hold up. Also from BKMK Press and published in 2018. So this afternoon, I'm delighted to add to this list Suzanne Cleary reading from The Odds, and let me just share the book cover for you. Her most recent collection of poetry, and which won the 2024 Narrative Poetry Award from the Laura Boss Poetry Foundation, selected by final judge Jan Beatty and just released this year by NYQ Books from the New York Quarterly Foundation. In her jacket blurb, I'm going to just stop share. In her jacket blurb, Jan Beatty says, "The odds speaks of the tender moments of unknowing in all of us." I am a big fan of the poetry of Suzanne Cleary, and that's because I want a poem to say, "Follow me," and I am led without awareness of being led, and I am glad at the end of that trip that I took the trip. So the genius of Suzanne Cleary's award-winning narrative poetry is the way its voice has such authority while letting the small moments of the story itself be the star. I think you just have to hear it to understand what I'm talking about. So please sit back, relax, and welcome Suzanne Cleary.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for that generous and lovely introduction. I am thrilled to be here today with the wonderful poets with whom I'm reading and generous hosts, and with all of you who are out there in the Zoomosphere. I'm going to start today's reading with a poem that is about something that I suspect a lot of us are doing these days. It's called Doom Scrolling at Bedtime. When I think I've read the worst of it, shootings, heat wave, wildfire, the latest diet craze, I see the headline, "Man Stopped at Customs with 100 Live Snakes in His Pants." And I understand I have just bought a ticket to Nightmare City. Each time the bedsheet touches my leg, I will shiver as if it's the winter night in my late father-in-law's story. The time Junior Quail parked his car at the top of a hill in a snowstorm and forgot to set the brake. By dawn, the green Ford had shifted and slid, swerved into a snowbank across the state line, so insurance wouldn't pay for the tow. My late father-in-law and Junior rocked and rocked that car, unable to budget until thaw, which comes late in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, state with the best city names: Defiance, Knock 'em Stiff, Mars. The towns of my upstate New York childhood lead back to the classic: Troy, Syracuse, Ithaca, Rome. Cities I didn't know existed beyond our shoe factories and dairy farms. I knew so little of the world, and now I know little enough that I think I can choose my fears, that I can name each danger. I scroll posts, reposts. Someone writes, "Has anyone tried unplugging the world and plugging it in again?" I wonder, how long will I lie awake wondering if the Snake Man was headed home? And where does he live? Or was he traveling for adventure, for business? What is more frightening than the mind? When you really think about it, what is more frightening than the mind? Um, before I titled my book manuscript, The Odds, I tried many different titles. And at one point, the book was going to be titled for this next poem, which I thought, shamelessly, I thought maybe it would help sell the book. Sophia Loren reveals her secret to staying young. When I get out of a car or I stand up from a chair, I never say, "Ugh." She pauses for the camera, shrugs, laughs. She wears the heavy black eyeglasses worn by Marcello Mastroianni, except with orange-red lipstick. Her smile, a discipline become habit, a habit become pleasure. Walking, she leans slightly on each arm offered. To do otherwise would be ingratitude and foolishness at her age, which she does not deny. How could she? There are photographs of her and her mother in 1948 feeding soldiers at small tables in the front room of her grandmother's house in Pozzuoli, what remained after the bombs of war. The scar on her chin from diving to the floor. Some mornings you don't feel you would like to get out of bed, she says, but you do. I like Sophia Loren, but I love Elizabeth Taylor, especially in the movie Giant. And when I started writing this next poem that I'm going to read, I expected the poem to be about Elizabeth Taylor, but it didn't turn out that way. The poem had other ideas. Giant. Giant is the film where Rock Hudson is upstaged by a piece of rope. He sits behind a big desk while James Dean sits before him, waiting to see if he'll be fired. For what? I've forgotten. There are lots of things that can go wrong on a ranch in West Texas. Hudson owns this ranch. Dean lives in a shack the size of an ice cream truck. In this scene, he holds a piece of rope 15 or 20 inches long. He drapes it across his palm, pulls it slowly off. He winds it loosely around his wrist, slips it off. Actors cite this scene as a master class in presence. Dean has the dirty blonde hair of the man I once saw at a funeral home, wearing a shirt from the local hockey team. Bright green, a white number. He waited in line with the rest of us, and when finally he stood near the casket, he held the hand of the widow between his cupped palms, as if he were holding a bird. This next poem that I'm going to read is titled Life Class. And you probably know that a life class is the art class in which students learn to draw the human figure. And usually it's a nude human figure. And this poem tells one of the lessons that the painter Thomas Eakins used to do with his students in his own life class. And you know, this is called life class. I already said that, life class. To force his students to see the model instead of their drawings of the model, Eakins bans pencils and paper from the room where the nude man stands, beside the gas lamp suspended to draw shadows from the body's angles and curves, each darkness suggesting the armature upon which the shapes depend. All is silent, still, a full 10 minutes until Eakins rings a glass bell. Students run to the door, press messily out. They climb the staircase 2 steps at a time toward the room where easels stand ready. 3 flights they must climb, carrying the image of the model in their heads, where it flickers and fades, comes again into focus. The first lesson, to see. The second lesson, a distant second, to turn it into something else. Following life class with a poem called It's Okay to be Cremated. It's okay to be cremated, says the Catholic Church, as long as the ashes are not scattered. The remains must remain together in an urn or cigar box or Tupperware, which then may be buried or set on the mantle or the floor of the closet. It doesn't matter, as long as you are not poured into the lake where you learned to swim, or into the wind over any place so loved you thought it was heaven. The remains must remain together, the burnt and the broken bits of you together, as they were in life, where your love was wild and foolish, then selective and careful, and then, if so blessed, wild. The remains still holy, says the Church, after the soul has flown on its long wings far. I'm going to read 2 more poems. This one and the one following it. First, I'm going to take a sip of tea. Okay. I don't think that this penultimate poem needs an introduction. It's called "If You Cannot Be Kind." I used to wear glasses that turned dark in sunlight and never turned all the way back, so I looked like Roy Orbison, but shorter. And on a day he'd left at home his guitar, which he didn't need to write a new song. In his head, he could see the song, could hear it as if he were touching each string, each downstroke and upstroke, each space between. Roy Orbison, who I would not hear of until years later, and for years after that, I would think he was blind. But the story of Orbison's dark glasses is this. One day, he entered a TV studio and walked straight to the mic. Forgetting he still wore his sunglasses, forgetting everything but song, he began, and no one stopped him. No one stepped forward and held out a hand saying, "Here, Roy, I'll take those." Not one of the studio crew in short sleeve white dress shirts and narrow black ties did other than cross their arms, lean back on their heels, and listen. Not one yet thinking of the story he would tell that night over supper, the refrain he might sing for his wife. Not one would think of his own close brush with fame. Oh, it is a rare and unsung talent to recognize greatness in others and then lose oneself in it. As happened that day, Roy Orbison found his trademark accidentally, like the discovery of penicillin and the Post-it note. Roy's pitch black lenses coincidentally shielding his eyes from the harsh spotlight. The struggle to see in strong light is ancient. Nero stared through a thin pane of smoky quartz to see gladiators bleed under the Roman sun, which was, and by the way is, the same sun from which you shade your eyes with hand or glasses. My early generation photochromic lenses suffered photochromic fatigue, which is the gradual degradation of the ability to both darken and clear. To darken and clear may be what creates a song, a life. I wore them yesterday, it seems, then cast them off for clip-on, flip-up sunglasses popular in the 80s that now look ridiculous. Recently, I heard this, and it stopped me. If you cannot be kind to yourself, imagine yourself in a photo from childhood. Then imagine being mean to that child. It should be impossible. It should make your eyes water.
Amazing. I'm gonna encourage everyone to unmute if you'd like to right now, please. Oh, Suzanne, I'm sorry. I thought you were
Oh.
finished.
You know, I did time it, and I know I think I do have time for one more.
Yes, yes.
I love the spontaneous enthusiasm. Thank you. That's very, very sweet, Lynn. Thank you. I'm reading just one more poem. Just one more poem. And you know, the introduction that I put together is perfect for this moment, Lynn, because of what you just said. For me, one of the best things about being a poet is the fact that it has brought such wonderful people into my life. It truly is. And so many of you are here today, and I so appreciate that. Um, Being a poet, I have gone to many poetry readings and many poetry festivals and conferences. A number of them have been academic conferences. And this final poem that I'm reading today is about an academic conference, but I still did do some research for the poem. And I'm going to, I hope I remember to do this, to use air quotes like this around words that I've taken directly from my very serious research. Literary discussion. We're standing in the conference room discussing Emily Dickinson's Scientific Eye when at some point I say Angie, as in Angie Dickinson, and I stop dead. Blanche, fake cough, start to back away when I notice no one seems to have heard me say Angie. They probably are too young to remember her. She of the lacquered white blonde page boy that never moved from the early 60s until maybe today, for I think she is still alive. And so I let my slip slide, sure as Angie performing a soft shoe beside Frank Sinatra, both of them wearing tuxedos, but Angie wearing only the top half, her long legs bare except for glossy nylon stockings. Angie of the turquoise eyeshadow, her eyes, whatever she trained them upon, full of adoration, as a poet's eyes must be, I believe. I could probably relate this to Emily, whose love for the world was thwarted by the world, yet never dimmed. Witness the scrapbooks she assembled of wildflowers and grasses, accompanied by Latin names in her tiny script. As the discussion continues, I cannot help but hear Angie's soft purr of a voice and my father's newspaper crinkling in his lap when he heard Angie and looked up at the TV, at the only woman he'd ever found beautiful except for my mother. The show was Policewoman, which aired from 1974 to 1978, approximately the worst years of my life. Angie was Pepper Anderson, an undercover cop in LA. With a bit of sleuthing, I discover that as of 2023, Policewoman is the oldest live action television series with all of its main actors still living, including nonagenarian Dickinson and Earl Holliman. Wasn't Holliman involved in Watergate? No, that was Halderman, and a different world from the one in which we now live. Or maybe it's the same world, but with different actors. My father's been dead nearly 15 years, my mother 2 months later. I read on Wikipedia that by the last season of Policewoman, Dickinson tired of appearing in scenes where the phone rings while I'm taking a bath. Don't we all? I mean, is there any one of us who is not awash with the time in which we live, in which we have lived? Did you know that Emily Dickinson loved to bake? I offer. She was famous for her bread and cakes. What feeds us, I wonder? I mean, why do we stand together and talk poetry as if we understand where it comes from, as if it isn't nearly always a surprise and almost embarrassing how much we love it? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I apologize for interrupting at the end. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful reading. All three of you. I mean, this was, let me just share our graphic just so you can review our readers from tonight, from this afternoon, I mean. Is Suzanne Cleary, Martha Collins, and Jane Rosenberg LaForge. And what we'll do now is have a open mic with I just have 3 names. So if there's anyone else, speak now. And our first open mic reader, thank you so much, all 3 of our featured readers and now our 3 open mic readers. Please welcome Mick Cortez from San Francisco. Are you still with us, Mick? Let's see. Do you want to check yeah, Mick's here. Well, okay. I think she's muted. Maybe she doesn't realize she's muted.
Yeah, she's here.
Let's go to the next person and maybe Mick will pop in by then. So our next one, open mic reader, is Robbie Nestor. Robbie, you with us?
Yes. Thank you,
Okay.
Susanna. Susanna's putting up the image, but you probably do every one of you know it. This is from my new
Yes.
book, About to Disappear. It's an ekphrastic collection. And this poem is called Nighthawks, after Edward Hopper's painting of the same title. We're voyeurs, watching from a distance, absently observing the street. And how could we avoid it? The storefront glows like an aquarium, inviting inspection, its Art Deco exterior curved, sleek as a shark, a Bentley cruising the block. The 4 specimens behind the glass might have emerged from a dream or diorama, a Disney vision of the future, all gleaming surfaces, already obsolete. The men in their hats and suits, the woman in her red dress, the silver urns of coffee dispensing wakefulness. Believing that seeing implies understanding, we study the 2 men seated at the counter, those doppelgangers. The one at the far left corner observes the couple, if that's what they are, sitting silently before their coffee. It's a closed system, no way in or out, suggesting that even things seen most clearly remain essentially unknown, unknowable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robbie. I guess I'm unmuted. Okay. So David Langley, you wanted to read a poem. So let's welcome David Langley in the open mic reading. Don't forget to unmute yourself, David. There you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. This poem refers to kindness, but I wrote this poem long before Suzanne wrote her poem about looking at a picture of yourself in childhood. So I don't know, maybe I inspired her. I don't know. My doctor gives me in middle age the secrets to a long and healthy life. Digestion begins in the mouth, so chew your food slowly. Eat 4 or 5 small meals each day rather than 3 large ones. Thankfulness precedes happiness. Cut down on fats and white starches, follow the food pyramid, eat fruits and vegetables, the more colorful the better. Remember, it's always business, never personal. Lift with your arms and your legs, never your back. The winds of grace blow all the time, you need only to lift your sail. Exercise regularly, but don't overdo it. First, be kind, then be kind. Lastly, always be kind.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
Fantastic. Okay.
Oh, Mick is back. Okay, Mick, you want to read your poem, and then we'll have our last open mic reader, who's Marilyn Johnson. So go ahead, Mick.
Okay. This poem is called Disposing Nuclear Waste. We have known for a long time now how to settle the nuclear waste dilemma. And we include nuclear bombs in our solution. By their own nature, those nukes are reckless, toxic waste. The surest method is to deliver these deadly materials on a one-way rocket to the sun, itself a giant nuclear reactor that can absorb it. We can do this, but with two caveats. The first is a complex math problem. We ought to measure how much can the sun absorb before its own nature is altered. It's been assumed the impact would be nominal, but let's not leave that critical mass to chance. The second problem is far more complicated. It requires a conscious calculation by the world's people. You see, the imperial regime we live under compels world war for private profit, and nuclear waste has immense value to the weapons magnates, making it unlikely we can dispose of it until the imperialist order is broken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you very much. Let's have our final open mic reader. Marilyn. Marilyn
Thank
Johnson.
you.
Hi.
This was a wonderful reading, and I particularly loved hearing two people, Suzanne and Martha, who have personally helped my poems. This is called I Need the Stories of girls herded into paddocks, girls sealed in crates, girls in locked factories, smoke curling over their shoes, girls shuttered and swaddled, anchorites, nuns, daughters in thrall, or captive in ordinary houses. I need the story of the girl with no prospects, the governess, the mail-order bride, the one carried to the underworld. I need to hear about the girl who escaped and the marks she made on the closet wall. I need the diary left in the rubble. I need the tale told by the tooth in the door, the charred bus, the running shadow in the desert. I need the story of that girl, the last of her people, promenading for no one in a cape she stitched of feathers.
Oh, beautiful. Very beautiful. Thank you so much. So that's our reading. In closing, I just want to remind everyone that tonight's reading will be uploaded to YouTube. And let me just actually stop the recording right now. Well, actually, I won't do that because I'm going to give you some information. I just posted, here we go, in the chat, our website. I encourage you to visit it, and you can click on the readings in the past if you're curious about who's read in our series. It's really kind of amazing to go through our archive gallery. In the meantime, you can also see the reading on YouTube. Our next reading is January 10 at 3 p.m. It's a Saturday, and we will feature Margot Taft-Stever, founder of the Hudson Valley Writers Center and Slapping Hall Press, and whose latest chapbook is Bear Book Writer that just came out from Broadstone Books, and two other readers to be announced. So thanks again for tonight's amazing readers. I'm just going to switch to gallery mode. There we go. Thanks again for tonight's amazing readers, Suzanne Cleary, Martha Collins, and Jane Rosenberg LaForge. I'm going to take us now, close the recording, and invite you to unmute yourself.